Before we go and get into the kick panel, install that in the car, we want to do the testing back at the amplifier for the situation if this harness didn't exist, or if for some reason you didn't just buy this harness in the first place, which would make more sense just to buy it and get the perfect signal, because it's going to give you a full frequency output. It's tapping in before the amplifier and giving you a full subwoofer output, meaning it's going to play all the way down. There's no bass roll off, there's no EQ. It is the crystal clear, perfect signal that is coming out of the factory radio before the amplifier, which is in turn the amplifier, as you'll see, is manipulating the sound and changing it, EQing it, as it were. Let's get some tools and let's take a look at that. Some of the tools we'll be using to do our testing is a handheld RTA, a tone generator, polarity tester, and the all-important digital multimeter. The digital multimeter is the most important one of these tools. If you don't have one and you're in the 12-volt world, well, you need to go get one and buy a decent one. I mean, you can get a cheap one for like 20 bucks, spend a little bit more and get a little better one. In this corner of the car is the factory amplifier. There are 4 plugs attached to it. Looking at this plug here, you can see these 2 giant wires on the end and then some fatter wires in the middle. I feel like these 2 here are going to be our power and ground for the amplifier. To test that, we'll set our digital multimeter to DC, which is the line with the dashes beneath it, probing the ends of the amplifier. We can see we have 13 volts. These indeed are the power and ground for the amplifier. The next step is to figure out what these next 2 wires are. The goal of what you're trying to do here is figure out what every wire in the plug is for. Some wires you're not going to be able to do that. Some wires you can. The wires that you can, you want to know, because then you have less mystery. Using our digital multimeter again, we'll switch it to ohm. And the reason why we're doing that is because we want to measure for speakers to see if these 2 are in fact speakers. We get a 2.3 ohm load on the first set and a 2.3 ohm load on the second set. So if these are indeed speakers, they're 2 ohm speakers, which is something, if we're going to replace them and keep the factory amplifier, going with a 4 ohm speaker might be a bad idea. But we still don't know which speakers they are yet. For that, we will take our tone generator. We hear sound, so we know it's a speaker. Let's go figure out which one it is. Passenger front door. My guess is that the other one is the driver's front door. And it is. We know what this harness is for power and ground, and for the front 2 speakers that are 2 ohm, and we also suspect are subwoofers. Plug the amp back in. I'm going to use the RTA to find out if they are in fact subwoofers. To do that, I'm going to play some peak noise. Look at the RTA here. This side of the meter is highs. This side of the meter is low pass. It is definitely playing low pass. We can also see the high pass filter and low pass filter that they've applied. It's a band pass filter. It has some form of a subsonic filter built into it to roll that bass frequency off, to limit the performance of those speakers in the door so that they don't blow. If it's giving you enough information for the sub enclosure you want to connect to it, you're golden. I want to figure out what kind of output voltage is coming out of that factory radio. To do that, we're going to switch over to the digital multimeter. We're going to put it to AC, which is the volts with a squiggly line above it. We need a frequency that we're going to play. We also need a frequency that we're going to play that falls somewhere into the range that that RTA showed us, meaning the lowest frequency and the highest frequency. We want to be somewhere in that middle. If you don't have an RTA, you can use a tone generator app and play like 50 hertz, 60 hertz, 70 hertz. Take voltage readings all across the board and see which one is the highest. That's what you're looking for, the highest voltage output. For this, I'm going to start at 50 hertz and see what kind of output voltage it gives us there. For this, you're going to need 2 people, one to work the volume knob and the other one to look at the digital multimeter. And go, Fernando. 8.71 volts. Now we'll move up to 60 hertz. 8.62 volts. Let's try going down to 40. Looking at 40, we can see it starts to go down. Let's try 80. So right between 50 and 60 is where we got our highest reading, but it's 8 volts nonetheless. That means we want an amplifier that can handle at least 10 volts of high level input. You want to make sure you have some leeway. As you can see there, it fluctuates a little bit. Plus you might have something that has a lot of loudness in the recording, which could overdrive. 10 volts would be a minimum. The last test we want to do, since we have the voltmeter hooked up, is see if there's DC offset. DC offset is going to be what is going to create our remote turn on for us. Most amplifiers amplifiers nowadays have some form of DC offset trigger. Even high level to low level adapters have DC offset triggers built into it. It's a 6-volt DC that comes over your speaker lines. It's there all the time. You don't hear it. It doesn't affect anything. To do this test, put your meter to DC, leave the positive probe connected to the amplifier, take your ground and go to a ground source in the car. And you'll see that 6 volts. The radio's on right now. Turn the car off. As you notice, the 6 volt is still there. DC offset is connected to the data bus in the car. Your radio puts out chimes and all kinds of things when the car is off. This doesn't turn on and off with the key. It turns off with the data in the car. This can stay active for up to 3 minutes in some cases. It's okay though. The reason why it's like that, if you have a Highs amplifier hooked up and you have warning chimes and beeps and all these things that happen once you unlock the car and get in, if the system was off, you wouldn't hear those things. Let's say you left your headlights on and you don't have auto headlight off for some strange reason. You turn the car off and that chime shuts off. You don't know your headlights are on. You come out to a dead battery. That's just how DC offset is designed to work. This amplifier is on, so the output is on. After a couple minutes, you can go back and test it, and as you can see, it's off. This one stays on for about 30 seconds. The nice thing about it is it will always work, always there. It's just like a remote turn on. It's a super reliable way of doing things. Personally, a big fan. If you were just adding a subwoofer, you could pretty much be done at this point. You know everything you need to know about adding a subwoofer. If you're not doing just a sub amp, then you're gonna wanna know what the rest of the amplifier has in store for you. The next plug on this has 8 wires, and we need to figure out what those 8 wires do. We wanna do the same test on these 8 wires and figure out what they are. Since we already know that the main power for the amplifier is in the harness below, that doesn't mean we shouldn't still check for power. Sometimes there's multiple things going into the amplifier, but it's best just to be thorough. Put our meter back to DC and probe each one of those connectors to see if in fact they put out any power. While connected to test for DC, switch it over to ohms and see if you get an ohm load read. In this case we do, we get 2.4. And do that to all 4 of them. 2.4, no voltage. After testing every speaker, clearly this car is all 2 ohm. If I was gonna do any upgrade in this, I would definitely be putting a Highs amplifier in it as well to make sure I keep my power. These all look like speakers because we're not getting any voltage, but we are seeing the ohm load. Next step is to tone generate them and see what we have. First one up, let's go see where that is. That is the driver's rear door. That's a set of the greens here. I'm gonna go see where that is. All right, that is the passenger rear. Sounds like the driver's front. Driver's front. This has to be the passenger front. So it goes driver's rear, passenger rear, driver's front, passenger front. Moving on to the next test, we're gonna take a look at what these things are doing on the RTA. For that, we'll play pink noise again. This is the frequency coming out of the dash speakers. They are actively crossed over, and there is some form of an EQ on them. The rear speaker, some form of a crossover, both high and low, and has an EQ on it for sure. If we were to grab the rear speakers or the dash speakers to connect the subwoofer, subs wouldn't work. That's why you have to be real careful as far as what speaker you're grabbing. That gives us all our speaker information. So our output side, we got it all. We know how many speakers are in the car. We found all of them. We know what it looks like, what signals coming out of them. The only thing we haven't tested on those is if we are going to be integrating into those, we need to know the polarity of those speakers. We need to know which wire is positive and which wire is negative. And that's where the PT9A Plus comes in, which is a polarity checker. And this is going to do that for us. What this is designed to do is tell us the polarity in pretty much any given situation. In this case, we can unplug this from the amplifier, which means we can plug this directly into the speaker wire. If you listen carefully, you're hearing a popping sound coming from the front mid bass. Looking over here, I have my positive in the yellow and my negative in the yellow black. If you have 2 of these, you can leave this one back here and run up front and test it. If you have 1 of them, by lengthening the speaker wire out so where you can take this up to the front, you can test it there as well. And the tip of this is a microphone. Testing it, we have a positive. If it was the other way, that red light would come on. We can write down on our notes that yellow is positive, yellow black is negative. And that's a pretty cool way of doing it. However, what if that speaker was blown and we still needed to know what it is? Well, now we have a different issue. because we need to know which wire is positive and negative, but we don't have a speaker to see how it's moving. No problem. This has an output here. You can plug this in to your radio via the aux jack, or you can download a Polarity pop track to your phone, or this actually comes with a thumb drive that you can plug into the USB. There's several ways that it comes with in order for you to get the popping sound to come out of the radio into those wires. So this is going to go positive, positive, negative, positive, positive, negative. And we're metering the signal that's coming out of the radio, not the speaker. We've gotten the same information. We still know that yellow is positive and yellow black is negative. If you test all those speakers, write it all down, now you know how to hook up your high level to low level adapter and making sure you have the polarity correct. Check every speaker. What a lot of manufacturers will do is they'll stagger. It'll be like positive, negative, and then they'll flip one. And then that'll totally screw everything up. You don't have one of these, and you're like, how do I do this? It is gonna be more difficult. You will need a functioning speaker. So let's say the driver works and the passenger doesn't. Switch the two, put that functioning speaker over there. You can take a small 9-volt battery and tap the speaker. The speaker will either move out or the speaker will move in. If it moves in, it's backwards. If it moves out, it's correct. In this case, we didn't have to do any of this testing because we have the Amp Pro, which is going to plug in and take care of all of this for us. That signal is going to be flat. Don't need to worry about any of that. It's going to plug in and give us the signal output that we need up front, not back here.